Hello, this is Duck. Let's talk about Dragon Ball Z Kakarot's DLC 5. So, I have been playing the DLC for a little bit longer than I should have. I think it's an excellently designed DLC for the game, for the gameplay, at least. Ground battles add a level of fun I didn't expect to continue to enjoy past a couple of hours. But I gotta give kudos where they are due, and gosh darn it, Bandai Namco, you did well designing the ground battles. I've had a blast fighting Tien and Piccolo in the tournament, and I've had loads of fun finding bandits around the map. I do have some qualms with the game though. Looking at the reviews, it's mostly positive, and although I have complimented the gameplay for DLC 5, I don't think I'd go as far as to compliment any other aspect of the DLC. Spoilers lurk ahead for the game, its DLCs, as well as the arcs it is based on in the manga. I hope you enjoy my review of DLC 5. So let's hit some bullet points for what I want to talk about within this review. First, I want to talk about the gameplay in depth, since it's a great aspect of the game. Second, I want to talk about the story. Next, I'd like to talk about the characters in the DLC, as well as the fights. We'll also talk about the missed opportunities and what I would have added or changed to make this DLC as good as the gold standard so far of Kakarot's DLCs, the History of Trunks. This DLC is a long shot away from DLC 3, which is unfortunate because it had the potential to be the best DLC in the game. Gameplay changes form from the base game to have Goku and Tien partake in ground battle, with brief snippets of going into the air only to drop back to the ground. I don't exactly know why this makes my brain get all the dopamine, but dopamine it gets in droves. Just like in the base game, you are given up to 4 super moves with slight adjustment to how they work, since they are designed around, shocker, the ground combat. Goku has a body blow, which helps him launch his opponents helplessly into the air if successfully executed. The Kamehameha, which shoots a blast forward towards an enemy, though not high in the sky if an opponent does a flying super move. A forward thrusting Kamehameha that he shoots out of his feet that's like a flying tackle, and a solar flare. He also uses a couple techniques he can learn later on after the DLC's story is finished, but I will talk about poor design decisions later. Tien has his Dodon Ray and Tri-Beam, which are functionally similar to the Kamehameha, a move called Machine Gun Dragon, which is a volley of rapid punches, and his classic technique of the solar flare. Tien didn't get the hype or the love he deserved in this deal, as you will see and hear me complain about later. I mean, this is kind of his last hurrah as a rival to Goku, and yet you only get to play as him in 2 fights. That's right, 2. And you can't play with him even as a support after the DLC is done. You don't get these new moves added for him in the base game. In fact, you get a big fat goose egg for the base game. I wonder if there was backlash for the DLCs 1 through 3 and Bandai changed how they did them, since DLC 4 also didn't add anything to the base game. If that's the case, it's a crying shame, since I'd have loved to gain these moves in the base game, or the ability to play as Tien freely in the DLC, and base game intermissions as a reward for finishing the DLC. Alas, there are no base game rewards for beating the DLC. No new moves, playable characters, game modes, outfit changes, or new sub-stories in the base game. And I think we can assume that'll be the case going forward, which is just a crying shame to me. Have there been any other changes to the gameplay in DLC 5? Oh, the Flying Nimbus gets a needed upgrade to speed, as it is your way of flying in the DLC. I honestly had a blast just zooming through the skies on the Nimbus. There is also a tough training mode in the DLC, which allows you to do the fights throughout the game again at a higher level. Neither of Tien's 2 fights seem to be there though, which is odd since for DLC 4, you were allowed to do Prince Vegeta's fights in its version of tough training. There are many bandit ground battles and this DLC's version of Horde mode. Although at first these were fun, I have the same complaint I levied at the Horde battles in DLC 2 and 4. The Horde is fun to fight from like 45 to 75 opponents, but becomes a slog any higher the number gets. Though in this DLC, they definitely seem to have improved this version of the Horde mode, as none of the fights go for nearly as long as the ones in the prior DLCs. The other exciting part of this DLC's Horde mode is that it feeds into you getting more of your power as Goku. Goku helps the police catch criminals who were released during King Piccolo's reigns. Wait, is that why they had King Piccolo and Kid Goku's fight? And burned a chance to have an arc be playable as another DLC? So we can help the police? It's been like 3 years, and Goku has to fight literally thousands of bandits. It's not even that well justified. I think this is another poor design decision, but we'll talk about that closer to the end. What other gameplay decisions do we have to talk about in this DLC? Restaurants. This DLC really didn't want to account for you getting super powerful early on and made a new restaurant that isn't affected by your community board. Isn't that great? It has these things called meal tickets, and instead of getting permanent stat buffs, it gives you experience and temporary stat boosts. I have nothing good to say about this system. If it was looped into the community board in some way, and we gained some new meals from this that buffed you in different ways from the base game, and then by completing the DLC you unlocked restaurants in the base game, maybe I would like it. They did not do that, so I do not like this system. It's literally just a way to get yourself experience, but it's a poorly thought out system that does not use the previous community board stuff to do any of what it needs. It just feels like a spit in the face. Hey, thanks for all that hard work. Screw you, we didn't want to account for that. This DLC has a systemic issue with player freedom and rewards. Oofda. Let's get on to the story. The DLC starts off on a bit of a nostalgia trip, with King Piccolo and Goku's final battle. It's a fun fight that is decently well put together, and has a new stage that is the King's destroyed castle. What, you wanted to see King Furry's castle? No. You get a flat field to fight in, so the ground battles can be shown off how much better they are from the base game. 'Cause they're better than the normal fights. I think this is a rough start to the story, because although it gives you the context for fighting Piccolo Jr. in the tournament, you didn't necessarily need that. And since the DLC primarily focuses on the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament anyways, this context doesn't actually do anything for the story overall. If instead we started with Tien's drum fight, then Goku defeating Drum, and then King Piccolo in his fight, and overall expanded this for a sec, perhaps I'd feel differently. But that's not what we got. We then get a shot-for-shot remake for the opening of the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, which I have to say did get me pretty excited. It's one of my favorite arcs in Dragon Ball, and seeing everyone's reaction to Goku's growth spurt, as well as some of the best outfits for Goku, Tien, and Krillin, was really cool, even if they all change right away into their fighting gi. We skipped the preliminary fight with Champa against Goku, and all the chump fights for the preliminaries. This is disappointing, as even though they are quick fights, these set up the atmosphere for the rest of the tournament. Who is this mysterious hero fellow? Is Chi-Chi anonymous? Mercenary Tao is alive and wants revenge on Goku and his brother's former students. This could have been a good chance to have a moment to swap over to Tien, have him fight his low-level fights, and have some padding. Padding can be good, especially when it allows you to level your characters and gives you more than 2 fights. Yes, I am salty they advertised us getting to play as Tien, and then made him have 2 fights, one of which is skippable. After a cutscene showing us what the 4 semi-final fights will be, we have the first of Tien's fights. As mentioned above, this one is skippable. You have to go to him as Goku and tell him Chaozu, who is in the hospital due to Mercenary Tao's brutal beatdown, is okay. And Tien will then talk about how he used to train with Tao, leading to a fight with non-cyborg mercenary Tao. This is a fun fight, and I wish they wouldn't have made it skippable. It's just kind of odd that a flashback fight is optional. After this fight, or if you skipped it and continued the story, Cyborg Tao and Tien fight. I gotta say, compared to the flashback fight, this is not a fun fight. It's just a one-phase battle, which is super easy, even if you are lower level than Tao, and I think it would have benefited from a second phase, where Cyborg Tao uses his sword against Tien and cut him, and then a harder phase starts for Tien. Instead, that part is a cutscene. We then breeze through a cutscene that shows that Goku beat Chi-Chi, Krillin lost to Piccolo, and Yamcha lost to a disguised Kami. I am going to pause for a moment and tell you that I love Tien. He's not my favorite Dragon Ball character. That honor goes to Yamcha, who was warped over and over in an unfortunate bid to show how powerful Goku is. Nor is he my favorite Dragon Ball Z character, since Krillin really picks up the slack and becomes the one useful human. But Tien is special. He was Goku's first true rival. His love interest was taken away from him by Toriyama's bad memory, and over time he had all of his weird stuff taken away from him. He created the multiform technique. He could grow arms out of his back in a way that could have made his fighting style wholly unique. Most of his techniques are outright harmful to him, and yet he can use them and seemingly mitigate those harmful after effects. He is the stoic Z fighter, just like Piccolo, but often forgotten because he's not well liked, I guess. This was our chance. Tien's fans' chance to play as Tien as a major player in the game once again. And that was taken from us for no good reason. Why the hell did Bandai even make him as a fighter for 2 fights if they weren't going to put their full effort into it? I would rather have skipped his fights if our boy Tien didn't get the respect he deserved in this DLC. This arc, the 23rd World Martial Arts Tournament, is supposed to be the moment the Earthlings show that they have potential, just like Goku. But due to Goku getting incredibly lucky, he's a step above them in battle. Piccolo comments Krillin on how powerful he is in this arc. Kami compliments Yamcha for how formidable he has become in their fight, because Yamcha literally created a technique that nearly knocked Kami out in a surprise attack. Tien holds his own against Goku until Goku takes off his weighted training clothes, because each Earthling, other than Chaozu, is incredibly strong, but can't hold a candle to Goku. Not because he's a Saiyan, or something so stupid, but because they are a step behind him with training. Is it any wonder the Earthlings, whilst training with Kami in the Saiyan arc, reach Raditz level in a year? No! And yet for some reason, in the arc they are relevant. Bandai Namco chooses to actively disrespect the characters and their growth. I would have rather had a different DLC come out rather than this garbage that doesn't understand the arc it is adapting into a video game format. What a shame! This is probably the only Dragon Ball DLC we will ever get for a game. Dragon Ball is when the Dragon World was a wondrous place. I can understand not playing as Krillin, not playing as Yamcha, or Hero, Kami's disguise. But come on, Bandai. You as a studio made the choice to have Tien in the game and playable. You were responsible to make that a fun experience for all of your player base. You failed at that goal and disrespected the source material you chose to adapt. Dragon World at this time had rural cities that felt ancient and yet new, like a journey to some sort of Western place. It felt like ancient China with modern technology, with the most urban places feeling like some future bubble-shaped alien world. It was unique. It had its own feel for everywhere you went, and it was wonderful. I need to get back on topic. It just upsets me that our chance to see the cool older side of Dragon World was squandered. So Tien beats Cyborg Tao, and now we get to the good stuff. Goku versus Tien. A two-phase battle, 1 against 1, and then Goku versus the multiform Tien, 4 versus 1. Both of these fights were a blast. I should mention that when you fight in the tournament, there is a risk of ring out, and I absolutely love this gameplay wrinkle. It's just a little smidge of extra challenge that makes the ground combat worthwhile. After defeating Tien, the game breezes on by what happened to Hero vs. Piccolo Jr. fight. And then we get to the 3-phase Piccolo versus Goku fight. And holy crap, this is genuinely my favorite part of the DLC. First you fight the base form Piccolo, then him as a giant, and finally Goku fights him in a devastated and destroyed city, only barely knowing where the rinks once was, to a dynamite, epic final battle that Goku barely squeaks out a victory to, knocking Piccolo out of where the ring would have been and winning the World Martial Arts Tournament. I have only one complaint about this ending, and that is that you have 5 cutscenes in a row rather than these cutscenes being merged together or having a break of some sort since the game breezes through the end of the tournament. Kami offering Goku the position of Earth's Guardian, Goku's marriage, the credits, and Goku and Chi-Chi finding a new place to put their house. I am a little sad that they didn't make the post-arc stuff part of this DLC. I'm not sure if it's canon to the manga, but even as filler, going around to cool off Ox King's castle, gathering everything needed to save Chi-Chi's wedding dress, including meeting the person in charge of the gateway to the other world, and finding out where Grandpa Gohan went, and then getting Chi-Chi and Goku's wedding to cap off the DLC, I think would have made the experience a much fuller feeling DLC. We kind of covered characters during the story, so I guess we'll get into the missed opportunities and fixes I would have done to make this DLC that much closer to DLC 3 and that gold standard. First, add more to the King Piccolo fight. Started with Tien, since in this version of the DLC we want to respect him as a character, giving him a better billing with Goku. This is the Drum versus Tien fight, showing the new ground combat with this fight shows that we want to put a different foot forward, not only presenting the spotlight with Tien for a moment, but also showing why ground combat is so much fun. After that fight, we had the Drum versus Goku fight. Since Tien lost this fight, it sets up one of the themes of this DLC. Goku is always one step stronger than everyone else he is friends with. So after the mini King Piccolo arc, we have an intermission where Goku grabs the Dragon Balls in his Power Bowl. During this intermission, Tien is not playable. This allows for Goku to gain that foot up we were talking about once again, as he goes up to train with Kami. This lets us use the same assets in the game already, but also allows us to explore the devastated ruin of King Fairy's castle, the battlefield and its surroundings, Kami's house, and Korin's tower, with the latter two just being smaller versions of what's in the base game. If we want to be ambitious with this DLC, have a second intermission with Tien, Krillin, Chaozu, and Yamcha, where Tien is playable and the others can be used as supports during their filler training arc, where they literally fight a volcano. Since it's a filler, we can rearrange it to have Tien do the major points of making water flow to cool the lava. The preliminaries should be covered, even if briefly, as these fights do add to the story, even if it's just Champa versus Goku and then Tien and Goku discovering Chaozu lost to Tao. For the skippable fight with Tien, let's make the Crane School Chronicles, as it's called in the DLC, actually a chronicle. Multiple fights where he can add his full moveset, with the final fight being against Mercenary Tao. Maybe have 1 or 2 against Chaozu while he's developing moves, showing how Chaozu actually does help him develop these techniques. If we want to really be ambitious, Maybe give him a forearm transformation that gives him a similar power boost to Namekian Fusion Piccolo. This justifies why it would be optional, as it boosts Tien's moveset so he can have his full repertoire of stronger moves in his fight against Cyborg Tao. Speaking of the Cyborg Tao fight, it should be 2 phases, so that Tien gets that love in the story he should have always had anyways. Another change I would have is let Goku fight Chi-Chi. It's a brief fight, but it could be fun reenacting the moment Goku chooses to be with Chi-Chi for the rest of his lives. After this, most of the story can go on as it did, from Tien versus Goku, to Goku versus Piccolo. These were solid fights. I was happy with the latter half of the DLC and wouldn't change the fights themselves. If we want to be ambitious again, we could cover Goku and Chi-Chi's road to marriage, with Chi-Chi becoming a supporting fighter. I think that all of that would shore up the story to be as fulfilling as DLC 3 was to play. But that doesn't add anything to the base game or address the issues with the restaurant things with the meal tickets. So what do we add to the base game now? Well, for starters, the Flying Nimbus' speed boost, Tien being playable with his full moveset from the DLC, as well as Goku's moves being transferred to the base game. Other than that, after DLC completion, if we are being ambitious, a tournament mode, which is ground combat, as well as the Patrolman Horde mode, restaurants, and ground bandit fights using enemies from each era of DBZ. I want to be really ambitious and give Tien a sub-story in the base game to resurrect Drum and defeat him himself, as well as a sub-story during the first intermission where we address him in launch, since they clearly don't end up together. The last thing I would add to the DLC is allowing for Goku to use all of his moves at least at the lowest level. I've always hated in Kakarot how you can't use things outside of the era that they were used in. Like how you can't use the Super Masenko or the Ultimate Masenko for Gohan during earlier arcs. I can understand why they did it. I personally love being able to use all of your powers and be the strongest version of you earlier on. And that's why, I feel like they got confused with their design philosophy on that, because in DLC 1 and 2, they make it so that you get the Super Saiyan God, Super Saiyan, and Super Saiyan God. And you could just use that throughout the game, and it's just it makes it so it's okay, why are you adding these to the game but not other things? It's just kind of silly. That's the last thing I would add. So where would I rate DLC 5 out of our current DLC? Unfortunately, due to its flaws, it's pretty low on my list. Its second half keeps it out of the D tier, as does its superb ground combat. Almost everything else anchors it down though. So this DLC goes in the C tier. Get it as part of the season pass or get it on sale, but I cannot recommend this at full price. What a journey. I expected to write a couple pages as a bullet point to keep me on track, but ended up with a 7-page script. That just goes to show, even as a small DLC, I had a lot to say about this one. I think I may do a series rating each DLC on their own, with DLCs 1 and 2 suffering the consequences of splitting a single DLC into 2 for no good reason. Comment down below if you'd be interested in that. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.